Hey everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter where we review every single Palme d'Or winner. We're making our way through them. Today we are talking about the 2016 film directed by Ken Loach. Its name is I, Daniel Blake. It's a film about British people. I might or might not have begged the gods to give us more British people films in one of those descriptions for a recent movie, and it's come around to haunt me.
Boy, did we find the gentleman for it in one Kenneth Loach.
Oh, yes. Kenneth Loach is...
one Daniel Blake.
Yes.
And one Daniel Blake. They are delivering a tale about modern Britain that doesn't make modern Britain look so good. We are going to discuss, as usual, this film. But first, I'm going to remind you real quick about what we talked about last week because, I don't know, maybe you care. We talked about a rather, well, actually, where did it go? Oh my God, I lost it. There it is. French New Wave film called A Man and a Woman. It got a score of 6.9, which goes at spot number 7 on the list. And so if you want to hear our thoughts on a film with some grooving tunes, some cool visuals, and a bunch of other stuff, the French New Wave, we haven't really, gotten to dive into that before last week. So go check that out if you're interested. And
Have any of those been released lately? Maybe we reviewed them.
We caught one of those at the theater.
Yeah. Wow.
The French Newer Wave.
The French Newer Wave.
The West Wave.
A lot to think about.
A lot to think about there.
Comment down below.
Yeah. Speaking of comments, Abram has our featured comment for this here episode. What do our viewers want to let us know about?
Yes, this comes from our Man and Woman review from our good friend, member of the community, Raina Harper. Join our Discord.
Shout out.
Come chat with us about movies. Raina says the following. Hearing about these movies makes me so hyped for the chance to see some of the initial showings in just a couple of weeks. I will report my thoughts on all the ones I'm able to see, and it was your guys' content in part which encouraged me to apply to go. Can't wait to check.
Oh, we had real life impact.
Wow. Yeah.
This is our reach. This is our influence.
First time ever.
First time for everything.
Hey, first time for everything.
That's what I just said.
Raina continues by saying, can't wait to check out this movie soon as well. Stay awesome and analytical. P.S. As a fun challenge, you could try and cold predict what films will be the Palme d'Or winner this year based on the competition lineup. We can report back at the end of next month to see if any of you guys get it right.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
It is a good idea.
We can also report because actually I think it's quite heavily covered what wins the Palme d'Or when it happens. But Raina, I appreciate you being our reporter
boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground in France.
Shoe leather journalism right here.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. Well,
Leather to the pavement.
A quick other shout out just to our friend Andrew Roscoe, my Star Wars shows fame, who simply says in the same episode, showing support, peace sign.
This also counts.
Yes.
We approve of this. We approve of the showing support.
We love the people who just comment to goose the algorithm. It doesn't happen often, so it's a nice little surprise.
It's very nice. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, lovely commenters. If you have thoughts on this film, write them down below. If you've seen it or have experienced something similar, I don't know. Well, let's talk about it because this is quite a heavy film, quite a difficult one to watch. Tanner, would you kind of synopsize this here movie and tell us what it's about?
Timo, there's nothing I would love more to do.
Wow, really?
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Pretty high bar.
So we are, as Timo indicated beforehand, in what is approximating modern day Britain, in a northern town north of London. We're not in London. We're in
Newcastle.
Newcastle. Thank you very
Which,
much.
if you are unfamiliar with the geography of the United Kingdom, is about as far north as you can get in England without going into Scotland.
Okay.
Sure.
Very good. Thank you for the geography lesson. So, but who was there? Who was there? Who else would it be than the titular character of this film, Daniel Blake? Daniel Blake has recently suffered a heart attack at work, and thus has been sort of told by his general practitioners, his doctors, that you can't go back to work. You got to apply for social welfare benefits from the British government. And as he comes to find out over the course of this film, very difficult to do, lots of bureaucracy, lots of hoops to jump through, which ultimately seem to only serve to demean and belittle people who are seeking out these benefits. Along the way, he meets a young single mother named Katie, who has 2 young children, who's recently moved to Newcastle, who is also seeking out these benefits. And they form a sort of bond as they both struggle through, this to Daniel, newly discovered unemployment and poverty, and Katie seems to be quite accustomed to this sort of living. But they help each other out, and we also learn a bit more about the community around Daniel and Katie. ultimately, if we want to talk about the end of the film, Daniel, while seeking out some of these benefits to appeal a decision that was made, dies of a heart attack and is eulogized at the end of the film by Katie and other people that knew and loved him.
Mm-hmm. So who would like to begin and describe their own thoughts and opinions on this film?
I think you should, Timo.
Okay. All right. I'll start. This was a really difficult movie to watch. Like, this movie was really, really pulling on my emotional levers and was honestly bringing me to tears at many points throughout the film. It's a very realistic film. It's a very down to earth, unflashy, very unconcerned, I think, with filmmaking elements, and it is entirely concerned with this plot and the plight of our main character in trying to go through this nightmarish bureaucratic system and trying to show us not just what that is like literally like, but also what does it do to the people and what does it force the people who are in this to go through and how it makes them feel about themselves and their situation. And I think that this is like not a movie that I seek out to watch. I don't really enjoy crying my eyes out while I'm watching a movie, but I appreciate it for making me feel that way. Like, you know, there's the things and pieces of art like this that inspire and evoke such a strong emotional response for me, I think deserve some merit because that is very difficult to do. And I think that in this film, our acting and directing combine to make a very, very believable and very realistic sense, which only heightens the message of this film that the British government is evil.
Yes.
Yeah. And the system that that these people have been placed and forced into is unavoidable and sort of maze-like. And I think that is really what I take away from.
I'm gonna say
Daniel
it
Blake.
now so that I don't talk about it for the rest of the episode. But the Franz Kafka novel, The Castle, is like exactly this, right? And so,
second note on the page, Timo. I just wrote the word Kafka-esque with an exclamation point.
Let's get everybody say Kafka-esque on 3, and then we'll be done with it. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Kafka-esque.
Kafka-esque.
There we go. I didn't know about that one, and I don't really know much about Kafka, so
right.
I said that without the knowledge. So basically, I lied to you
It's
guys.
just following with the crowd.
Following with the crowd, yeah.
I don't really either.
But I thought this was a really, really good movie. I think that in its depiction of that oppressive maze-like structure of the bureaucracy, I think it works really well. I think that the characters are very well fleshed out, even though there are only a scant handful of them that have any particular weight in the film. I think the only thing holding it back from me from being like something that really impacted me emotionally, even though it certainly did at moments, is I felt that it leaned a little bit into melodrama of like, of course, there are moments of levity of the characters having a bond, but there were some moments where it's like, yeah, this is kind of like poverty porn, just like kind of like throwing it in your face, but not to the point where I'm like, this is a unworthy film of acclaim, or that I did not enjoy or respect the craft or the performances. And the one other small criticism that I have is it is so unconcerned with the filmmaking that the one apparent filmmaking choice that it does, which is very slow fades to black, I found to be very, very corny. And every time one of those happened, I was like, this feels like, I don't know, like someone's ending like a scene in a student film. It's just like, it's kind of drifting in the wind. But again, those are minor criticisms in the grand scheme of things. I thought this was a great movie, 2 very, very impressive lead performances, and just delivers on exactly what it sets out to.
Mm-hmm.
I think this movie is pretty much perfect. I was very, very, very moved by it, and ultimately that's really the highest praise I can give. I think that in the current decade, basically the best propaganda you can make, and I think this film leans very heavily into its political message. It exists to deliver its political message. The best type of film like this you can make is about class and about the complete inability for our culture and British society, but basically every society,
Western society as a whole,
to have a safety net beneath it for people like Daniel Blake and Katie and Daisy and Dylan,
yes,
who are Katie's kids. I just sort of found myself lost in it. It was the film feels like it's an anchor on you, and you just sink deeper and deeper and deeper into the despair that the film cultivates. And I think the sort of hopelessness of it and the fact that we rarely leave that mood is what makes the film so effective. And the fact that it simply just ends is a perfect testament, I think, to what the film is not only trying to, but succeeding at doing. I think this is just an incredible achievement.
Yep.
May I ask something
Um,
before your thoughts, Tanner?
Yeah, go ahead.
How long ago did you guys watch the film?
Last night.
Last
Yeah,
night.
last
Okay,
night.
so I was like 40. I finished like 45 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just shows the difference in like scheduling and planning ahead.
And like, yeah.
I mean, I'll concur. Basically, I found this film extremely moving. I was basically in, I was really just locked into it for an hour and 40 minutes. It's quite breezy, but still at the same time conveys this very human sort of saga through the unemployment welfare process and how, as I said in my sort of plot synopsis, I think this film really drills home what sort of like the belittlement that is inherent to the system and how it is set up to make you feel that way. I am reminded, of course, of ripped straight from the headlines. I think about a week ago, the current Prime Minister of Britain rolled out some sort of new program that would prevent general practitioners from handing out. Like it's a very strange system they have where like instead of doing sick notes, they do fit notes. So it's more like if you can work, you should be working, which isn't exactly something this film tackles. It's sort of from the other side of it, but I mean ultimately it's all wrapped up in the same issue, which is the welfare state and how it is not built to necessarily help out people. It is meant to be like a funnel to wean people down to like truly the people who are not
the least number of people the state can help, the better.
Exactly. Thank you.
The thesis.
We are like as a sieve, just sort of like trying to shift out as many people as possible who can't fill out things online, who can't make it to appointments on time because they have 2 kids and they don't know the town very well. And all these things. I think it displays such of them, all these things with such a human, deft hand that it really just plucks at your heartstrings.
I think that's a kind of where I want to start talking about this film because it's so politically centered. The political situation of this film is really, really interesting to me, and how its setup allows for the exploration of this story and this themes. And I think as much as we hate on British people in that place, right?
Jokingly,
this story really couldn't be told anywhere else. I think that it is the specific nature of British society and the ways the historical trend of a big welfare state in Britain after World War II really develops, is really robust, is really strong, and then the steady hollowing out of that welfare state starting in the 80s with Margaret Thatcher. And so that culture and that history, I think, is really on full display here. And the film is, I think, very skillfully in between being like the welfare state is bad and the welfare state is poorly executed. And I think that there is a clear message here that is not deriding the state for trying to help people, but it is deriding the state for getting in the way and for making it seemingly intentionally impossible for anybody, not anybody, but for people like Daniel Blake, who through no fault of his own, he's an elderly guy. He has no idea how to use a computer. And like you said, that is actually, that's a rather major plot point and a rather major stumbling block for him to move forward in this process because they're so adamant about it being online.
Yeah.
And they're so unwilling to help in the moment. This film, just like every scene in which he has to deal with the bureaucracy is so outrage inducing, is so just like, because Daniel Blake is pretty much always positioned to be in the right, he gets a little tense and he gets a little angry, rightfully so, with the people, and he yells at them. But the response that he gets time and time again, over and over and over, of "I can't help you. That's how the rules are. There's nothing that I can do about it."
Yeah,
it's
send him to another person.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
Fortunately
there have been like lots of political texts written about like why this is the case for the neoliberal welfare state, but this film, I think, puts it on blast, puts it on full display,
yeah.
and in a way that just makes you, because you like the guy. I like Daniel Blake. I think
Yeah.
he's, I want him to
course.
live and to be happy, because I see why he's a good person, and yet there's just nothing he can do.
Interestingly enough, the idea of being pushed from person to person and struggling to get a straight answer from someone that you are going to for a straight answer is something that I've actually been dealing with recently. As I've been trying to set up an appointment with a doctor, and I did today finally. But it took. Thank you, everyone. Clap. Leave clap emojis in the comments.
Yeah.
It took me over 2 weeks to the point where I was at the actual doctor getting a physical. And I'm like, okay, I want a recommendation. And he told me a place, and I called the place, and they go, actually, we don't take your insurance. So then they sent me to another thing, and then I called them, and they weren't open. So then I called them the next morning, and they're like, we have to send you to another person. And they're like, we'll put you on a wait list. And then finally today, I talked to an actual guy, and now I have an appointment. And so the idea of following that process through someone unlike me, where this is not a pressing issue on my health or financial situation, where that the annoyance of me doing that is kind of just like, I guess it'll be like a couple weeks later that I end up getting to it, to where Daniel Blake is living not paycheck to paycheck because he doesn't have a paycheck, and it is having to sell his things and scrounge and meet people and make deals. That I think increases the pressure and attaches it to my mind in a very specific way, because I think that films that tackle this kind of bureaucratic class system are very interesting. But for me, it's usually the films, and frankly, films that I prefer to this one, a very subjective level, but films that tackle this and place it into some sort of more fantastical scenario. Movies like Brazil and Everything Everywhere All at Once and a game like The Stanley Parable. These are 3 of my top 2 favorite movies and one of my favorite games that deal with this exact concept, but they do it with wormholes and time warps and flying through the sky in Brazil, whatever it is. But I really like that Daniel Blake does something that frankly I don't think I've ever really seen in a film, is approach that bureaucratic maze through a incredibly human perspective of just literally day to day, what is the process of sitting on the phone and calling. And I think the most distinct element of this film that interests me is that Daniel Blake does not know how to use the internet. And he doesn't know how, he literally has never used a computer before, or if he has, he forgot because he doesn't know how to use mouse. But that is a character trait I don't think I've ever seen in a film before. And it's certainly not to the point where it is an intrinsic element of the progression of the film and the character development in multiple ways and interaction between characters. And that single choice, I think, pushes this film outside of the bounds of what other films are willing or interested in tackling, because Daniel Blake is a kind of character that most movies don't care about.
Yeah,
they make a joke out of him. They make a joke out of the old character who can't use the computer at the library.
Yeah, or he's a side character, or he's just played off for laughs, something like that. But
what do you know? In
from the
real
very beginning,
life, all those people are real people, and so this movie
Yes.
chooses to center him as a real person.
Yeah. But it also, the final point I would say is the reason why that works so well for me is it makes that element, which is so foreign to people our age, the 4 of us who have never not known how to use a mouse or how to click on a text box or send an email or whatever, or type on Word. I think it clued me into the stakes of this film and the impact that this system has on Daniel Blake's life, even more so, because instead of saying, oh, you just need to send an email as like a normal thing that happens in conversation that I can do in 10 seconds.
Is a gargantuan hurdle for him to
It
get
becomes
over.
an obstacle.
Yeah.
And even just the words of, okay, this has to be typed up. I'm like, oh God.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not going to be helpful. And that just makes me listen to dialogue in a different way and understand someone else's problems in a different way. It creates, I think, a very empathetic mood for people like us who have never had that be an issue and will never have that be an issue, except for also it made me think, oh, man, in 60 years, there's probably going to be something that we don't understand that the system is then based around. And so...
No, Grandpa, you put your VR goggles on backwards.
So what socket in the back of my head do I plug it into?
Your haptic gloves. You have to turn on your headset before the haptic gloves, Grandpa.
I just don't. And back in my day, you could do it in whatever order you wanted.
But do you guys you understand what I'm saying?
I
Yes,
do, yeah.
I understand. Yeah, I mean, for me, what I think you're speaking to a really fundamental and important part of the movie, which is working against a very common, and it's hard for me to speak from a British perspective because I'm not as clued into British politics as American politics,
course.
obviously, but a very conservative idea that people who rely on welfare are lazy,
Yes.
or any of the associated adjectives. I think this film very deliberately and effectively establishes Daniel Blake as a hardworking, deeply caring man,
Yeah,
who
honest.
who checks every box you would expect a good person to check. He, with no real pretense or reason, helps out Katie and Katie's kids just because he knows it's the right thing to do. He wants to get back to a point to his job. He wants to have a pint with the lads. He is just a good, regular person who also, as you're saying, Tucker, is at a fundamental disadvantage. And so I think not only the characterization of him, but I think also critically the characterization of Katie shows us characters who are usually looked at through a conservative lens that is happy with the hollowing out of welfare states as having a skill issue, of not working hard enough, of not caring enough, of not being a good enough citizen. And I think that idea that the film ends on in the eulogy of him above all being a good person and a citizen is very key, because the film is seeking to illustrate that people who are in these dire straits are just people like us. And as a very common, especially left-wing adage online goes, you're only ever one paycheck away from this happening to you too.
Yeah.
And I think that the effective core of this film on a writing level is giving you characters that feel very real and are not in any way flawed. They're incredible people, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Daniel Blake still dies.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
Go ahead, Timo.
you're right that they're not flawed, but they're real people. Like Dan, he yells at his neighbor kid for leaving the trash out and he's unhappy about it. But the flip side is that he knows his neighbor and they have a connection, and while they get a short moment to connect with the Chinese guy on Skype, it's not really shown to be particularly deep, and they're all kind of just like, wow, look at this guy, like he's crazy. But that moment at the end where his neighbor kind of sees him and sees that he's doing pretty poorly and says, you need anything, you let me know. And I mean it. I mean everything. You can, that kind of like neighborly connection is, I think, is very
The
special.
core of this movie.
I think, and the core of this film is the ways in which the state is so, and the state and the people who represent the state are so inhuman, who don't see the human. They don't see the person that they're talking to or that they are supposed to be helping. But all the people see the people on the street when he's spray painting on the side of the building.
Yes.
His neighbor, the way that both Daniel and Katie come together and help out each other, and especially when her daughter comes over towards the end of the film and is like, did you not help us? Can we help you? Like, let us help you. There is such a, I think, that's the silver lining of the film, and the I think the part that you're supposed to take away feeling good about is that despite all the horrificness and the and the futility, I think, of your neighborly help, it is still a good, a loving, a warm, and a human thing to do, even if it doesn't succeed.
Yeah.
It doesn't succeed to get, honestly, it doesn't succeed to get Katie out of her situation, and it certainly doesn't succeed to get Daniel out of his situation, but it makes it easier. It makes the passage less difficult.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I just wanted to complicate that a little bit. The last thing I wanted to say on this point is I think the film is also illustrating, to your point, Timo, about it not effectively helping in the end. The film is not trying to say we replace a welfare system with a stronger sense of community.
Yeah.
Because in our protagonists, we have two characters who in some ways can't actually really help each other. And especially towards the end of the narrative, Daniel has very little offer. I find the exchange between him and Katie very interesting after he goes to try to intervene when Katie becomes an escort,
Mhm.
and he says, "I made you a bookshelf." A bookshelf is nothing. A bookshelf doesn't help Katie. Katie,
Yeah.
Katie needs money. I think what the film is trying to navigate is, you're totally right, Timo. There's this warmth to the characters, and there's a like a interpersonal recognition. But I think there's also sort of a thematic recognition that the people aren't enough, and the people aren't a replacement for a system.
I think
Yeah, I mean,
that
totally.
the line "I am a citizen" is the really. I mean, that's the
It's not a
last line of
dog.
the film.
Daniel Blake might not be a dog, but he has got that dog in him.
He's very
So
true.
you guys brought up a lot of things that I actually want to comment on. If we can go sort of all the way back to what Timo had said about this is a story that couldn't take place anywhere else. I do, to a degree, that is of course true with the specifics of it. But I think Abram raises great points about how this film really interrogates in a circumspect manner the ideas of that many people have, that like, oh, what, welfare cheats, whatever. I think one of the most frustrating and emotionally affecting scenes, since we are in Daniel Blake's POV, is when he is on the phone. He has handed his CV to this guy who owns some sort of carpentry hardware store, warehouse, whatever. And the guy gives him a call back. He's like, "Hey, I was looking through your CV. Looks like you're super qualified. I'd love to hire you."
He
And he's
doesn't
like,
give a shit that it's handwritten.
exactly. And so he has an appreciation for the experience and the like salt of the earth nature to Daniel Blake. And what does Dan have to say back to him? Is that he can't say, well, he doesn't say, well, I've had a heart attack and I can't really do all this. What he does say is, well, I can't accept that job because my doctors say I can. And I'm trying to get my benefits. And as soon as the guy hears that phrase, I'm just trying to get my benefits, which is what Daniel has been told for the past several weeks. He's like, hey, you got to do this. You got to go out looking for jobs if you want to qualify for this stuff. If you want to continue living in your house, eating, whatever. As soon as the guy on the phone hears, I'm just trying to get my benefits, he has spun off into an entire line of thinking that is very real for people in the world today, that, oh, this guy's giving me the runaround. He's wasting my time. He's just trying to benefit from government handouts, and he hangs up. And that's the last guy that guy thinks of him. And we know as an audience that that's not who Daniel is. That's not what he's trying to do. And in reality, that's what 99% of people are trying not to do. They're not trying to get these government handouts like conservative politicians, whether they be Republicans or Tories or whatever, are trying to tell you. That's not the case with these people. And I think what Daniel Blake does is really drive that point home with its characters, to the point where, Abram, what you were saying about how Daniel seems to be an inherently good person. He is, he checks all the boxes, what we think like a morally good character would be. And that could sound like a lazy character to write from Loach's perspective, creating this film. But I think there's a lot of great, subtle characterization here. You mentioned that he helps Katie simply out of the kindness of his heart because it's the right thing to do. And that's true. It is the right thing to do, and he does it out of the kindness of his heart.
But why does he get up to help Katie in the first place? It's because the same shit's happening to him. He's pissed off.
Exactly.
He just got to
let
his mind be set.
He's kind of doing it despite the people that are there.
He does it despite them, but also later on in the film, you understand that Daniel is the kind of person who he worked with his hands. He needs a project, essentially. His wife, who's died, it's at some point in the past before this film starts, was his project before that. He needs a person to help, and that's the kind of person that he is. He doesn't seek help for himself. He doesn't go to the food bank and say he rejects the food bank's offer for food. He needs someone to help himself.
Yeah.
And so Katie is that person to him.
I think it's actually interesting that I disagree that Daniel Blake is not a flawed character. I think his flaw is that he doesn't see himself as in the same position as the people that he wants to help.
Exactly.
In that he rejects the food offer, but he doesn't have food for himself. He just sold all his crap. The little girl comes to his door and offers him couscous, and he's like, "Go away, no," because I think he does see himself as that hardworking guy that had a wife and had a family and doesn't want to fully admit that this is the situation that he's in, that he is in a very similar situation to what Katie is in, of doesn't have the money to buy extra stuff and really only has his ingenuity and his previously established skills to work with. And I think that's his flaw. Of if he were, I think, a little bit more self-aware, I think he would open the door
Yeah.
when the little girl came there and accept an apple and a loaf of bread from the food bank that is literally there to help people like him, but he doesn't. And I think that kind of in the opposite way of what we're describing about how other people see, people that are in poor situations and are struggling, might see them in a negative light. I think the same can be true of not seeing yourself in the truest light, of not being able to admit yourself, not being able to be self-aware enough to accept help when you need it. And that is a flaw. And it's part of the reason probably why he passes away is that he hasn't been eating enough and hasn't been accepting the help that his family is offering.
He has no furniture in his house. Presumably he's like keeping his heat off for long stretches of time, just like Katie
no carpet.
was. I mean, like he's just shuffling around his house in a blanket. And like, all of that seems to be a detriment to his health.
Of course it is.
Yeah, of course. Which probably results in his death at the end of the film. In one of the most tragic manners that, most, I don't like to say ironic, but, just like a true tragedy in that he's in this room to appeal this decision.
Writing-wise, it's irony.
Exactly. Yeah. Writing-wise, it is irony. But
in reality, it's, oh, damn, that happened.
Exactly.
But it's written to the point of Ken Loach or whoever actually wrote the script for this movie.
Paul Loveretti.
Being like, look, he's at the cusp. He almost made it.
Yeah.
And then and also, by the way, as soon as he's like, I need to go freshen up that guy's dead.
Yeah.
He's not making it out of that.
I think I don't think it's a writing thing that it sort of telegraphs it too hard. I think it is, Dave Johns' performance that like through the whole rest of the film, he's been very steady, very, very reserved, all this kind of thing. But in that final sequence, he seems very shaky, very flustered,
very nervous.
something that we've not really seen from him before. And you're like, oh, something's wrong. We're at the end of the film. I think I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it also has to happen because the film is not about Daniel Blake getting back on his feet. That's in some ways contrary to the point of the film. I think that this is a weaker film if he does get his appeal.
Yeah.
And then he goes and he lives, because then ultimately that is the message in some ways is just fight hard enough and you'll get your benefits.
The system works ultimately.
Yeah. And that's not the function of the movie. And I think that the sort of sinking feeling that he's not coming back from the bathroom is critical.
Yeah,
and I think it's very, very smart on behalf of the screenplay to set up these inevitable moments that, again, to take my anchor metaphor from earlier further, bring you just really drop your stomach and your heart. The other one that I think is
I think I know which one you're going to talk about.
Is as soon as Katie walks into the convenience store.
You know that she's going to get in trouble.
And she's not there to steal like alcohol or something.
No,
and
or like a lottery ticket or something.
I think that is a really affecting scene, because it again is an illustration of the larger interpersonal futility that the movie is trying to convey. When the manager says, between you and me, this is settled, you should leave. That's not like
it's not played as a feel good moment.
No, it's not.
It's like, Katie just dodged a bullet.
And it's this guy is being helpful, but what good is that? You know, he can't let her he can't just give her the stuff every week. It illustrates that, again, the government should have been providing these things to the food bank or to people directly, so they have them. Because it's a key setup and payoff.
In the food bank, which is the scene I was going to talk about, which is a really, really tough scene. Also,
I think it's the best scene in the movie.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best scene. Where Katie asks if they have feminine hygiene products, and they're like, no, we don't. And like, that's, in the reality of that's just crazy. That's utterly ridiculous. And in a little bit of reading I was doing about this film, Loveretti and Loach, so Paul Loveretti wrote the film.
I miscredited the writing of this film to Ken Loach. It's not. It's Paul Loveretti.
They did a ton of research, and so I would be pretty surprised actually if that fact that the food banks don't have feminine hygiene
I mean,
products
it's
isn't
like
true.
here in America, you can't get like famously the thing is like you can't get diapers with food stamps. Like food stamps is a government program for food, just like a food bank would be.
Yeah,
But it
and
doesn't cover all of the basic necessities for a person or a family or what have you.
yeah, so that setup and payoff for that scene. I mean, in the convenience store, the thing that I noticed, and I think it's recalling my own time in Britain, is these big giant signs that say like CCTV in use, and it's
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
that isn't. You would be like, oh, that's exaggerating for the mise en scène of the movie. Like, no, that's just how it is. It's just really weird like that in England, and
Yeah.
honestly, to get on my soapbox, this is a
There we go.
dystopian. This is a dystopian movie, and it really says that, and it says to me,
Last of Us, eat your heart out.
the downward slope of British society. That the
Yeah.
things are just not. They are worse in that country now than they were 20 years ago, and it was worse 20 years ago than it was 40 years ago, and so it's not good.
I mean, yeah, there's been
Doesn't
a lot
inspire
of
hope and
conversation about like England as a sort of dying economy. What I had sort of noted earlier about the new program or directive from the Prime Minister about getting like basically essentially trying to force more British citizens to work even if they are ill or sick or have terminal conditions or something like that. Like just to try and bolster the economy from the off the backs of these sick and dying workers essentially.
Honestly, increasingly elderly too in England.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Their population pyramids, if you recall from 12th grade, they don't
Yeah.
look good. They're not the right direction. So
One thing I do want to mention about this film in terms of reflecting accurate politics, they did the research. I believe that it's real. Is that I don't have the basis on understanding of progression or history of British politics or policies that it seems like Timo that you do talking about of a history that leads to something like this. But I think the movie is actually smart in that it doesn't delve specifically into that, and I think brings me along as an outside viewer in a very comfortable way, or uncomfortable but
No.
accessible way,
Right.
in that Daniel Blake is confused about this too.
Mhm.
And he doesn't know which forms to sign or which person to go to. And so he's asking questions. And I think it works in both ways. I think that if you know the policies, if you know the
I have
structure
no
and the history.
idea how you fill out the forms, but I
Well,
do
of
know
course,
about
yeah.
the context, I guess.
Yeah. But that I think that can be like, oh, wow, this is really accurately portrayed and look at the impacts that this has. But as someone divorced of all of that knowledge, I found it to be even more oppressively confusing. I was with Daniel Blake in each situation of what does he say to this person? What does he need to do to fulfill their exact requirements? The communication is hit or miss in these bureaucratic situations. And so I'm left puzzling alongside him of, I don't exactly know what that means. And I don't exactly know what he needs to do to fulfill these requirements. And what is the ultimate goal of the way that they're kind of using word salad to like obfuscate things? Like, I've never been in that situation. I don't know the British structure and these policies. And that helped me to empathize even greater with Daniel Blake's situation because he has no idea what's going on either.
When they're rattling off the names of these forms and these committees and the appeal process and the different government bodies or whatever, it's all like just
And well,
going over his head and going over our head as audience members. And what are you're just confronted with this like slate gray office that is full of people just in suits and ties who all the actors in these scenes just convey this sort of like disdain for Daniel and all the other people in this office who are coming to them. From their perspective, it's like, oh, you're just here to make my life harder.
Yeah.
And obviously that's not the case, but it emphasizes the conflict inherent to the point that this film is making. And there is a good person in the
one
system.
good
Her name is
person in
Anne.
the system.
So this film isn't like completely doomer about the welfare state, but it's just like these people who are genuinely interested in helping you out are just crowded out by people who don't care and by a system who is set up to be increasingly confusing and restrictive.
I think that actually the key moment of that is when Anne is trying to help him.
Yep.
And her boss says, we can't do that. We can't set a precedent.
Yeah,
It's
you'll
what
set
the precedent of helping the fucking people that are there to get your fucking help?
I wrote that down. Manager, you'll set a precedent. And I finished off with of helping people.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, all this bureaucratic nonsense works because if you pay attention to it and are trying to be like, okay, if I had to be in the situation, what needs to be done? When you start to like try to connect the dots of like, do this, do that. You're waiting on this form. You need this phone call.
It still doesn't make
it's
sense.
actually still impossible. It actually is a thing that has been designed to literally not even work when it is working as intended. So it's very well done in the representation. I feel like this movie, despite it being entirely dialogue scenes and all of that, it is
No action sequences.
none of that. It is showing me everything. It doesn't tell me. It's show don't tell in a very, very dialogue heavy, very like moment heavy kind of way that I haven't felt very often in films. And I think is a way to be like, hey, you can still use dialogue and you can still use like scenes and drama and stuff to show your audience what you mean and to show your message. Because while this film is like this, I was reading a Guardian article about some of the stuff about this film and kind of the context of it. It was written during when it came out in 2016. And it says that a lot of people have called Ken Loach over many years. They've called him a very didactic filmmaker. And this is a very didactic movie, but it's not. People get up on stages and give speeches in this film, but in a way that is not overbearing to me. It is a way that is completely reasonable for the situation that the film has set up for itself.
Yeah. I think that's probably just because the dialogue is really well written.
Yeah.
And especially because they use a lot of terminology and slang and turns of phrase that are very foreign to us as foreigners, but feel very genuine in the pacing of their communication and the accents portrayed. I found that the specific turns of dialogue that they were using were just like ground me into the world even a lot stronger. Because it never felt like it was poetic writing or dialogue writing. It was very conversational, which I think obviously very much helps.
Yeah.
Aiden Buter, back with Banter.
I the only other dimension of the film I feel like we ought to touch on a little bit more particularly is Katie.
Sure, absolutely.
Because we've talked quite extensively about Daniel, but I think the scene. I mean, obviously, the big scene for Katie, in quotes, is when she opens up the can of soup in the soup kitchen.
Yeah.
But I also want to highlight what I think is a very, very effective scene wherein she's cleaning the bathroom tiles in the middle of the night, and one of the tiles falls and breaks, and she's crying on the stairs. And I believe her daughter comes down at that point and then leaves and then she continues to cry. I think that what's the actress's name for Katie?
Haley Squires.
I think that she has this very nuanced performance wherein she is both incredibly resilient but also incredibly broken. And I think she plays that beautifully. Yeah. When we hear sort of her side of the conversation with her mom on the phone, or we have her comforting Daisy in bed when Daisy has been bullied for her shoes falling apart and things like that. I think that there are all these different identities in the character of Katie that are all beautifully portrayed.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think that she also conveys the different kind of experience that it is for a young woman in poverty than it is for like
an elderly
blue collar, older, elderly white man in poverty. I mean, when she's approached by the security guard at like the convenience store, Ivan, that's right. And he's like, "Hey, I can help you out." Like, it's the moment how it's conveyed by Loach, but also how it's conveyed by Squires.
Yeah.
That like, it's like this guy isn't on the level. He
Yeah.
is not really looking to like organically, charitably help me out. He is looking to gain something out of this.
And I think it's smart to have it portrayed through her uncomfortability in that moment.
Yes.
Because the actor who's playing Ivan does a great job in that he is pretty soft in that moment.
Yeah.
And you see the look on his face. I'm like,
And he's
he's
very different
He's believable.
from the previous scene in which he's like,
Yeah, absolutely.
you got to
Yes,
go to the
yes,
office. Like he's very policeman, and he goes to being
Yeah.
which is also a very strange flip, and that I think creates a instinctual mistrust of his character from
Sure.
our
Yeah,
perspective,
definitely.
and also from Katie's, because we're like, he was just being horrible,
Yeah.
doing his job, but still doing his horrible job to her.
And then, of course, that leads into the sequence, which we had briefly talked about, where Daniel makes her the bookcase and he tries to like intervene from her being an escort. But like, it's that moment is like the peak of her desperation and her verbalizing, I don't know what to do other than this. Like, there's nothing else I can do. My kids are going hungry. What am I to do outside of this? And like, so the desperation underlines her performance much more than it does Daniel's, I feel, or the Dave John's, I should say, because it bubbles to the surface more. She is younger. She has been in this situation for much longer, and she's new to Newcastle as well. She's just moved out of London, forced out because of the increasing prices there of rent and food or whatever.
Mhm.
So the desperation is like at a
the
high
Guardian
point for her throughout the entire film.
British people would know this because the Guardian article said it that at this time in which she couldn't, there's no more houses in London. It's 10,000 unoccupied units
Yes.
because of London real estate, which is a whole nother issue. But
And Timo, if you can remember, link the Guardian article in the
oh sure, yeah,
description.
yeah. It's got a bunch of different perspectives. It's got some people that are, I think, very very charitable to the film. It's got some people who are willfully misreading the film, and I think if you want all the different angles and context, I think is where it's most valuable. I'll put that in the comments or in the comment, whatever description. Who knows?
Does anyone have anything else?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to note one more thing I didn't really get to talk about, but we did a little bit. The strength of community in this film, I think, is also strong, just from the side or even like single scene characters, whether it be China, selling his shoes for, marking them down, or the guy who like basically makes a folk hero out of Daniel Blake when he's spray painting the side of the building. Like, it's all super. And then like the crowd gathers around, is like, yeah, cheering him on. And then the people come out of the building, they're booing and jeering at the cops and everything.
The moment where he's like, the guy's like, stop that, and he just holds up the spray paint can in front of his face.
Yeah, he's like, hey.
He's like, I'll do it.
I mean,
It's like you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us.
Exactly. It's those kind of moments essentially that really again just underscore the like people versus state institutions that is key to this film. Like, all of the people who are not in them are banding together. They recognize that these fucking systems suck. They might have gone through them or know someone who's gone through them themselves.
And that the music
so
on the phone
they're all
is
banding
shite.
together about it. Yeah, the music on the phone is shite, of course.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it is something nice to take away from this film.
Yeah.
Which otherwise does not have very many nice things to think about.
Yeah.
All right, I'll quickly give you guys the palm details, and then we can
give it a
score.
score.
Or do you want to do that afterwards?
Let's give it a score.
Let's
Okay.
give it a score. I'm curious. I've been thinking about what I'm going to give it, and I've punched it in. Let's see.
Punch.
3, 2, 1, go! Wow, Tucker and I have really similar ideas. Okay, there we have it. The score is calculating 9.2. So wow, no
Whoa.
tie, which is going to
That
rocket
was close.
Daniel Blake all the way up to spot number 2 on the list. Whoa,
Nice.
Hey,
2.
it's like the peace sign that Andrew commented.
True.
There you have it.
He's prophetic.
He's
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 The point breakdown is as follows. Tucker gave it an 8.7. I gave it an 8.8. Tanner gave it a 9.2. And Abram gave it a flat 10.
Because I mean, I did say at the beginning of the review that I thought it was a perfect film.
Yeah.
And I was also like, oh, I'll give it a 9.8. And I'm like, I should just
Just
stop
do it.
beating around the
Yeah,
bush.
no.
Who gives a fuck?
Yeah, who
That's
gives
right.
a turkey?
Yeah,
It's.
yeah.
I think it's.
And you give it 5 stars on Letterboxd.
I did.
So
Perfect.
9.8 will be a lie.
I think
Because
it.
you're rounding.
I think it is an essential film.
Yeah.
I think that this is a really, really essential film that I would implore people to watch. In a similar way to like a Schindler's List, as we
sure.
mentioned
Yeah.
before. I think that there is a group of films that are essential for gaining a dimension of empathy and understanding
Sure.
as you sort of
It's
move
like
through the
a
world. I think this
letterbox
is one of
list
them.
titled "Films That'll Make You a Better Person."
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, really, the thing that I think you're supposed to take away from Daniel Blake is, that the British welfare system sucks and all of that, but more broadly, that like welfare systems are in place, like the whole the arbitrarity of all of them, I think, is important to the film. Like, you meet a certain threshold, you fill out a form,
You get-
when ultimately
You have 12
they are
points.
in
You
place.
need 15 points.
Exactly. They're in place socially to help people, and every step beyond that is restrictive and anti-human.
Mm-hmm. Palm
Palm
details.
details.
Yeehaw.
So this film won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival in 2016.
That's what we're talking about today.
That's what we're talking about today.
This guy,
the
this
jury
chucklehead.
president at that ceremony was a man who, with a film who I presume we'll all be watching very soon. That'd be George Miller.
David Leitch? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
George Miller was the jury president this year.
George Miller.
Hot off of Mad Max Fury Road, I presume. Yeah.
I mean, literally, yeah.
literally. Other members of the voting board that decided this film was the best in competition that year included Kirsten Dunst, Mads Mikkelsen, and Donald Sutherland.
Okay. They've
Of
got
the
good judgment.
21. This film defeated 20 other films in competition this year. Notable ones included American Honey by Andrea Arnold, Elle by Paul Verhoeven, The Handmaiden by Park Chan-wook.
Ooh.
Oh, that's a great movie.
Yeah. Loving by Jeff Nichols, The Neon Demon by Nicholas Winding Refn,
That movie
Patterson
sucks.
by Jim Jarmusch, Personal Shopper, the Kristen Stewart film directed by Oliver Ayasis, and The Salesman by Asghar Farhadi.
Sure.
Okay.
Banger lined up.
Yeah,
out
that's
of
a
the Cannes Film
pretty
Festival
good
this year.
lineup.
Now, this is the movie that I'm happy won, but
Yes.
I would really have loved if a Nicholas Winding Refn movie had won, simply for the sake of doing the
Well,
episode.
I got great news for you. I'd say Titan is pretty interesting.
It's very close to a Winding Refn film.
It's close.
And you know, Winding Refn's still, what, he's 40, 45 years
He's
old?
got time.
fucking
He's got
TV shows.
plenty of
though.
time.
He's gonna start
Yeah.
making fucking TV
That's
shows.
good fine. That's good
Nicky,
fine. Hey,
get away from Hideo Kojima.
yeah.
Get away from the back lot and get on location.
That's right. That's right.
Only God Forgives was so good.
Now he's in Kojima's contraption.
He's in the Kojima
They're
contraption.
just making TikToks.
He's in the Codraption.
No, not the
No,
contraption.
the contraption.
All right.
Well, let's
Contraption?
spin the wheel. Given that I like prayed so furiously to the gods in the go between. That's the comment, the description that has my
Fun of this,
pleading.
okay.
Imagine.
I make no requests of the gods this time. Do what you
Sure.
will, O lords
Do what you must.
of random chance. Tanner, pipes.
Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital or is it on real? Wheel, what's your deal?
Ooh, Wheel's deal is number 60.
Number 60.
Number 60. I can't believe it.
Very good. We didn't talk about the British lingo here.
I did.
Oh, then
Oh, okay, yeah. We didn't talk about it, the specific words,
Yeah.
which are
nigh
pretty good.
unintelligibility
Like
of 40% of the dialogue.
Out.
Thank
Actually, I
God we had subtitles for this one.
I didn't know what
suffered.
out
I
meant
did not
though,
wa-
because I play Dragon's Dogma 2, and they say out all the time in that game.
See, I am not a subtitle viewer, and so I just put on my listening ears and accepted that I would miss about 45%. It was not that much. It was not that much.
Yeah.
But I missed a
I
couple.
just
Just
work.
admitting defeat before the British people.
I just work for a British company, so this is just normal to a guy like
That's
me.
fair.
Yeah, you guys can do a guy like me as an
Uh-huh.
everyday conversation.
So what's
Okay,
number 60
film
on the
number
list?
60.
How about the movie next? This movie I would be flabbergasted if any of us have heard of.
All right.
This is the 1992 winner, starring Samuel Froler, Pernilla August, hey, Max von Sydow.
Oh, I know him.
I know him. He is a name that I recognize in America. And some other people.
Sure.
Directed by Billy August. This is The Best Intentions.
Oh.
Best intentions.
In this film about Ingmar Bergman's parents,
Oh.
Henrik Bergman is studying for the priesthood and trying to make ends meet when he encounters the lovely, affluent Anna. Despite their social differences, Henrik and Anna fall in love, wed, and move to the country. They lead a long, quiet life as Henrik works as a priest, but it isn't long before the simple and plain surroundings make Anna long for a more lavish lifestyle, which causes marital stress.
Sure.
Stress.
Strays.
Where does baby
It's like
Ingmar come in?
Yeah, why is this about?
It's like the King Richard of Ingmar Bergman.
Yeah, in a
Sure.
strange way. Okay,
Yeah.
sounds interesting.
Why not?
Why not? Hey, why not?
Well,
Now, this isn't. Yeah. Is Ingmar Bergman involved with this film to any degree?
Was he alive in 1992?
He's a writer. He's a writer on the film.
Okay. Oh, but okay. Question: Had he died? No.
He
Oh,
did.
he was
so-
alive during our lifetimes.
Yeah, he died in 07.
Holy shit!
1918 to 2007.
We breathed the same air as that man.
He's
wow.
the cinematic master.
And okay,
Anyway, we're watching a movie about his
a
parents.
movie about Ingmar Bergman's parents. It was old Pulp Fiction 91 or 93? It's like 1 year around this one.
Yeah, it
Doesn't
would've been.
matter all
Hang on,
that
hang
much,
on.
but I was like, ooh, we're
Hang on,
Look
let
at
me.
the list.
I know because sometimes there's multiple winners.
Oh, gotcha.
Pulp Fiction won in Pulp Fiction was 1994. I should have known. I should have remembered that.
94.
Pulp Fiction famously 1994, same year as Forrest Gump and Shawshank Redemption.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we didn't get that one. What was the name of the film that we did get? Remind me.
The Best Intentions.
The Best
We
Intentions.
should just review Shawshank. Just once we review Pulp Fiction, we should just review Shawshank just for shits and giggles.
Just to
Even
get
though-
the
Yeah.
big three.
Well, stay tuned
That's a good
here
movie.
on Backlot Banter for us to talk about Ingmar Bergman's parents next time around. Today, talked about Daniel.
Oh, Henrik and Anna.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Today we dove into Daniel Blake and
That's like the runtime of this one, by the way.
What is it?
It's 3 hours.
Oh, dare.
okay. Well,
Well, it's about a young priest and his wife.
That's
in the
true.
countryside.
there's a lot to talk about there.
Why
man.
would it not be 3 hours?
I don't know. I don't want to be a runtime queen. I take it back.
I'll be it.
Tucker will be for us.
Take the crown.
Take the crown. There you go.
Thanks for
Deceptive.
talking about this film and working through it because it was pretty tough and now feeling better. Well, stay tuned.
Therapy.
Yay! All right. We'll talk next time. All right. As I always say, stay cool, keep warm. Peace.